Widow found Cowboy bleeding in the field. He wore her husband's ring. The sky was still gray when she found him. The sun had not yet broken the edge of the world when Sarah Brennan walked out to check the corn. She moved through the rows like a shadow, her skirt brushing the dry stalks, her boots leaving soft prints in the dust. The morning was cool and still, the kind of quiet that made you think the earth itself was holding its breath. She had learned to walk alone. 3 years had taught her that. 3 years since James disappeared. 3 years since the marshal came to her door with his hat in his hands and no answers in his mouth. 3 years of silence, so heavy it pressed against her chest like a stone. She reached the far edge of the field and stopped. There was a man lying in the dirt. At first, she thought he was dead. His body was twisted at an odd angle, one arm flung out, the other tucked beneath him. His shirt was dark with blood. His face was pale as ash. She stood there for a long moment, her heart beating slow and steady, trying to decide if she should turn around and walk back to the house. Pretend she had not seen him. Let the earth take him the way it took everything else. But then his chest moved, just barely, a shallow rise and fall. Sarah knelt beside him, her knees sinking into the dirt. She reached out and touched his shoulder gently, the way you might touch a wounded animal. His skin was hot. Fever burned through his clothes. His eyes were closed, his breathing thin and rattling. She moved her hand down to his wrist to check his pulse, and that was when she saw it, the ring, silver, scratched, worn smooth on one side from years of work. A band with no decoration, no engraving, just simple and solid and unmistakable. Her husband's ring. Sarah's breath stopped. Her hand froze. She stared at the ring on the stranger's finger, and the world seemed to tilt beneath her. For a moment, she could not move, could not think, could not breathe. It was James's ring. She knew it the way she knew the shape of her own hands. She had watched him wear it every day for 7 years. She had felt it when he held her. She had kissed it the morning he left and never came home. And now it was here, on the hand of a dying man in her cornfield. Her mind spun. Questions rose like smoke. Where did he get it? How long had he had it? Did he kill James? Did he find the body? Did he steal it from a grave or a pocket or a dead man's hand? She should leave him here. Let him bleed out into the dirt. Let the crows have him. But she did not. She gripped his arm and pulled. He was heavy, heavier than she expected. She dragged him through the rows of corn, her boots scraping the ground, her breath coming hard. She did not know why she was doing this. She did not know if it was mercy or rage or something darker. But she pulled him all the way to the house, up the porch steps, through the door, and into the small room where she used to sleep beside her husband. She laid him on the floor, his head lolled to the side. Blood seeped through his shirt and pooled beneath him. She stood over him, her hands shaking, her chest tight. She should let him die. But she did not. She fetched water and cloth. She unbuttoned his shirt and peeled it back. The wound was in his side, just below the ribs. A bullet hole, clean through. She pressed the cloth against it, and he groaned, his body jerking. His eyes fluttered, but did not open. Sarah worked in silence. She cleaned the wound. She wrapped it tight with strips of old linen. She poured water between his cracked lips and watched his throat work as he swallowed. His fever was bad. His skin burned under her hands. She did not know if he would live through the night. She sat back on her heels and looked at him. Really looked at him. He was young, maybe 30. His face was rough and sun-worn, his jaw covered in dark stubble. His hair was matted with sweat and dirt. He looked like 100 other men she had seen riding through town. Cowboys, drifters, men with no names and no homes. But he wore her husband's ring. She reached down and took his hand. It was limp and heavy. She turned it over and looked at the ring again. It sat loose on his finger, as if it did not belong there, as if it had been borrowed or stolen. Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned. She wanted to rip it off his hand. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to shake him awake and demand answers. But he was barely breathing, barely alive, and she knew that if she wanted the truth, she would have to keep him that way. So she let go of his hand and stood. She covered him with a blanket. She moved to the chair by the window and sat down. The rifle leaned against the wall beside her. She pulled it into her lap and rested her hands on it. Outside, the sun finally rose. Light spilled through the window and fell across the stranger's face. He did not wake. His breathing stayed shallow and uneven. The fever held him down like a hand pressing on his chest. Sarah watched him. She did not sleep. She did not eat. She just watched. Hours passed. The light moved across the floor. The house was silent except for the sound of his breathing and the slow creak of the old wood settling. She thought about James. She thought about the day he left. He had kissed her forehead and told her he would be back by supper. He had smiled. He had not seemed worried. And then he was gone. Just gone. No body. No word. No trace. The marshal said he probably got robbed on the road, or killed by outlaws, or fell in a canyon somewhere and the buzzards took him. But they never found anything. No horse. No gun. No body. Nothing. Just absence. And now this man, this stranger, lying in her house, wearing James's ring. Sarah's hands tightened on the rifle. She did not know if she was saving him or keeping him alive long enough to make him answer for what he had done. But she would find out. The stranger groaned. His head turned slightly. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His fever burned on. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes fixed on his face, waiting. Waiting for him to wake. Waiting for him to speak. Waiting for the truth to finally crawl out of the silence and show itself. He woke to the feeling of rope around his wrists. For a moment, he did not know where he was. His head felt heavy. His side burned. The world was blurry and soft around the edges. Then his vision cleared and he saw her. A woman, sitting in a chair across from him, a rifle resting across her knees. Her face was pale and hard. Her eyes were the color of stone in winter. He tried to move and realized he was tied to a chair. His arms were bound behind him. His ankles were lashed to the chair legs. He could barely shift his weight without the rope cutting into his skin. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. He blinked. His throat was dry. He tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. She stood and walked to a small table. She poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup and brought it to him. She held it to his lips, and he drank. The water was cool and clean. It hurt going down. When he finished, she stepped back and set the cup aside. "Thank you," he managed. She did not reply. She returned to her chair and picked up the rifle. She laid it across her lap again and looked at him with those cold, unblinking eyes. "Where did you get the ring?" she asked. He looked down at his hand. The silver band was still there, loose on his finger. He had almost forgotten about it. Almost. "Ma'am, where did you get it?" Her voice was sharp now, hard as iron. He met her gaze and saw something there that made his chest tighten. Grief. Rage. Something old and deep and bleeding. He swallowed. His side ached. His head throbbed. But he knew there was no way out of this except the truth. "I took it off a dead man," he said quietly. She did not move, did not blink, just stared at him. 3 years ago, he continued, in a town called Red Bluff. "I didn't know his name. I still don't. You killed him." It was not a question. It was an accusation. He closed his eyes, took a breath, opened them again. "Yes, ma'am, I did." The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed down on the room like a weight. He could hear the sound of his own breathing, the creak of the old house, the faint rustle of wind outside. "Tell me," she said. So he did. He told her about the saloon in Red Bluff, about the card game that went late into the night, about the man who sat across from him, smiling and drinking and losing hand after hand. He told her how the man accused him of cheating, how he stood up and knocked the table over, how his hand went to his gun. "I didn't want to," the cowboy said. His voice was low, steady. "I told him to sit down, told him to let it go, but he wouldn't. He drew first." Sarah's hands tightened on the rifle. "I was faster," he said. "That's all. Just faster." He went down and didn't get back up. He paused. His jaw worked. He looked at the floor. "I didn't take anything from him at first. I just left. But then I heard someone say his name. Heard them talking about him. About how he had a wife somewhere. A farm. How he shouldn't have been there at all." He lifted his head and looked at her. "I went back. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see his face again. Maybe I just felt wrong leaving him there. I found him laid out in the back room of the saloon. Someone had cleaned him up, put his arms across his chest, and I saw the ring. Sarah's breath caught. She did not make a sound, but he saw it. The way her shoulders stiffened. The way her face went even paler. I took it, he said. I don't know why I did that either. I just reached down and pulled it off his finger. It felt wrong leaving it there. Felt wrong letting someone else take it. So I took it, and I kept it. He looked down at the ring again. It sat there on his hand like a stone, like something that did not belong to him and never would. I told myself I'd find his family someday, that I'd give it back, tell them what happened. But I never did. I just carried it, wore it, let it remind me every damn day what I'd done. He fell silent. The room felt smaller now, darker. Sarah sat perfectly still. Her face was unreadable. Her hands rested on the rifle, white-knuckled. His name was James Brennan, she said finally. Her voice was quiet. Hollow. The cowboy's stomach dropped. He stared at her. He was my husband. The words hung in the air like smoke. Heavy. Choking. Ma'am, he whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. He left one morning and never came home, she said. Her voice was shaking now. Just a little. Just enough to hear the crack in it. I waited for him. Days. Weeks. Months. I sent word to every town. Asked every traveler. No one knew anything. He just vanished. She looked down at the rifle. Her fingers traced the edge of the barrel. I thought maybe he'd run off. Or gotten lost. Or been killed by bandits. I thought maybe I'd never know. And then you show up in my field, bleeding and dying, wearing his ring on your hand like it was yours. The cowboy's throat was tight. His chest ached. He wanted to say something. Anything. But there were no words for this. No words that could make it right. I'm sorry, he said. It was all he had. Sarah lifted her head. Tears shone in her eyes but did not fall. She blinked them back. Swallowed hard. He drew first, she said. You said he drew first. Yes, ma'am. Why? Why would he do that? The cowboy hesitated. This was the part he did not want to tell. The part that made it worse. He was drunk, he said quietly, and angry. He'd been losing all night. I don't think he meant to. I think he just snapped. Sarah closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. He wasn't a gambler, she said. He didn't drink. Not like that. The cowboy said nothing. He had seen it before. Good men who made bad choices. Men who stepped into the wrong place at the wrong time and never stepped out again. I'm sorry, he said again. She opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, he saw something other than rage in her face. Something softer. More complicated. You kept the ring, she said. Yes, ma'am. Why? He thought about that. About the weight of it. About the way it sat on his finger like a reminder. A punishment. Because I didn't want to forget, he said. Didn't want to pretend it didn't happen. Didn't want to be the kind of man who could kill someone and just walk away like it was nothing. Sarah was quiet for a long time. She stared at him. At the ring. At the space between them. Finally, she stood. She set the rifle against the wall. She walked to the window and looked out at the fields. The morning light was soft and golden. The world outside was still and quiet. I should let you die, she said. Her back was to him. Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes, ma'am, he said. You should. She turned and looked at him. Her face was tired. Sad. Old beyond her years. But I won't. She crossed the room and knelt beside him. She reached out and began untying the ropes around his wrists. Her hands moved slowly, carefully. You'll stay here until you're healed, she said. And then you'll work. You'll fix what's broken. You'll mend the fences and plow the fields and earn what you took from me. The ropes fell away. His arms dropped to his sides. They ached. He could barely move them. And when you're done, she said, standing, you'll leave. And you'll take that ring with you. And you'll never come back. She walked to the door and stopped. She did not turn around. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, he said. She nodded once. Then she stepped outside and closed the door behind her. The cowboy sat there in the chair, his hands free, his body weak, the ring still heavy on his finger. He did not know if this was mercy or punishment, but he knew he would do what she asked. The days came and went like shadows. The cowboy healed slowly. His wound closed. His fever broke. His strength returned in small pieces. And when he could stand without swaying, when he could walk without gritting his teeth, Sarah handed him a hammer and pointed toward the fence line. "Start there," she said. He did not argue. He took the hammer and walked out into the field. The sun was high and hot. The ground was hard beneath his boots. He worked until his hands blistered, until sweat soaked through his shirt, until the pain in his side became a dull, steady ache that he could ignore. Sarah watched him from the window. She stood there with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. She watched him lift the posts, drive the nails, stretch the wire. She watched him work until the sun went down and the sky turned purple and the first stars appeared. When he came back to the house, she had food waiting, bread and beans and coffee. She set it on the table and walked away without a word. He ate alone. The food was plain but good. When he finished, he washed his plate and left it by the basin. Then he went to the barn and laid down in the hay. That was how it went. Every day he worked. Every night he slept in the barn. She did not speak to him unless she had to. She did not look at him unless she needed to. The silence between them was thick and heavy. It filled the air like dust. But slowly, the silence began to crack. It started with small things. A question about the fence. A comment about the weather. Words that meant nothing and everything. Words that reminded them both that they were still here. Still breathing. Still alive. One evening, after the work was done, the cowboy sat on the porch steps and rolled a cigarette. His hands were rough and dirty. His fingers shook just a little as he struck the match. He lit the cigarette and drew in the smoke. It burned his lungs in a way that felt familiar, comforting. Sarah came out of the house and stood in the doorway. She did not sit, did not join him, just stood there with her arms wrapped around herself. "You said he was drunk," she said. The cowboy looked up at her. The cigarette burned between his fingers. "Yes, ma'am." "How drunk?" He took another drag. Let the smoke out slowly. "Drunk enough to be stupid," he said quietly. "Drunk enough to forget who he was. Or maybe drunk enough to show who he really was. I don't know." Sarah's jaw tightened. She looked away. "He didn't drink," she said. "Not like that. Not ever." The cowboy was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, carefully, like a man walking on thin ice. "Maybe he didn't drink at home," he said. "But he was drinking that night. And it wasn't his first time. I could tell." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were sharp, angry. "How could you tell?" "Because I've seen it before," he said. "Men who drink like that. Men who act like they're fine until they're not." He wasn't just drunk. He was practiced at it. Sarah's face went pale. She looked like she might say something, might argue, but she did not. She just stood there, her arms tight around herself, her breath shallow. The cowboy stubbed out his cigarette on the step. He stood and walked past her into the yard. He did not look back. The next day, she asked more questions. They were working in the garden. She was pulling weeds. He was turning the soil. The sun was warm on their backs. The smell of earth was thick in the air. "What else did he do that night?" she asked. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. The cowboy stopped digging. He leaned on the shovel and looked at her. "Ma'am, I don't think—" "Tell me," she said. She did not look up, just kept pulling weeds. Her hands moved fast, angry. He sighed, set the shovel down, crouched in the dirt beside her. "He gambled," he said. "He lost. A lot. More than he should have. And when he lost, he got angry. Started blaming everyone else. Started saying the game was rigged, that we were all cheating." Sarah's hands stilled. She stared at the dirt. "Were you?" she asked. "No, ma'am. It was a fair game." She pulled another weed, threw it aside. "What happened after he accused you?" "I told him to calm down. Told him to take his loss and walk away. But he wouldn't. He kept pushing, kept getting louder. And then he stood up, knocked the table over. Cards and money went everywhere. Everyone went quiet. And then he went for his gun." Sarah's breath hitched. She closed her eyes. "I told him not to," the cowboy said softly. "I told him to sit down, to let it go. But he didn't listen. He drew, and I drew faster." She opened her eyes. They were wet, shining. "Did he say anything?" she asked. "Before he died?" The cowboy hesitated. Then he shook his head. "No, ma'am. It was too fast. He just fell. And that was it." Sarah stood abruptly. She brushed the dirt from her hands. She walked toward the house without looking back. The cowboy watched her go. He did not follow. He just picked up the shovel and went back to work. That night, he found her in the garden. She was sitting on the ground beneath the apple tree. Her knees were drawn up to her chest. Her face was buried in her arms. She was crying. Not loud, not shaking. Just quiet, broken sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. The cowboy stood in the doorway of the house. He watched her. He did not move, did not speak. He just stood there, holding the silver ring in his palm. It was warm from his pocket. Heavy. He had taken it off his finger that afternoon. He did not know why. He just felt like it did not belong there anymore. He wanted to go to her, to say something, to tell her he was sorry, to tell her that grief was a strange and terrible thing, that it changed shape over time, that the people we loved were never who we thought they were. That memory was a kind of lie we told ourselves to make the past bearable. But he did not say any of those things. He just stood there, silent, watching her cry. After a long time, she lifted her head. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stood and walked toward the house. She did not look at him as she passed, just went inside and closed the door behind her. The cowboy stayed where he was. He looked down at the ring in his hand, at the scratches and dents, at the way it caught the moonlight and held it. He thought about the man who had worn it, about the life he had lived, about the mistakes he had made, about the woman he had left behind. He thought about the weight of silver, the weight of shame, the weight of carrying someone else's death, and he wondered if he would ever be able to set it down. The night was quiet. The stars were bright. The garden was dark and still. He closed his hand around the ring and walked back to the barn. But he did not sleep. He just lay there in the hay, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of the ring in his palm, knowing that tomorrow would come and she would still be grieving and he would still be here, trying to make sense of something that could never be made sense of. And somewhere in the darkness, he wondered if forgiveness was even possible, if the dead could ever truly be laid to rest, if the living could ever stop carrying them. He did not have an answer, but he knew, somehow, that the question itself was the only thing keeping them both alive. Autumn came quietly. The air turned cool. The leaves on the apple tree began to yellow. The corn in the fields dried and turned brown. The mornings were sharp with frost. The evenings smelled like smoke and earth. The cowboy's wound was healed. His strength had returned. The fences were mended. The roof was patched. The work was done. It was time to leave. He knew it. She knew it. Neither of them spoke about it, but it hung in the air between them like the last breath before a storm. One morning, he packed his things. There was not much. A bedroll, a canteen, a knife, the clothes on his back. He saddled his horse in the barn. The animal had grown fat and lazy over the months. It shifted its weight and snorted softly as he tightened the straps. Sarah stood in the doorway of the house, watching him. She did not move, did not call out, just stood there with her arms at her sides, her face calm and unreadable. The cowboy led the horse out into the yard. The sun was just beginning to rise. The sky was pale pink and gold. The world felt new and old at the same time. He walked toward the gate. His boots crunched on the gravel. His heart beat slow and steady. He told himself this was right, that it was time, that he had done what he came to do, that he had earned his freedom. But when he reached the gate, she was there. She had walked across the yard without him hearing. She stood in front of him now, blocking his path. Her hands were folded in front of her. Her eyes were steady. "Wait," she said. He stopped. The horse stopped behind him. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. "Palm up. Open." "The ring," she said quietly. The cowboy reached into his pocket. His fingers closed around the silver band. It was warm. He had carried it for so long that it felt like part of him, like something that belonged there. But he knew it did not. He placed the ring in her hand. She looked down at it. Her fingers closed around it slowly. She did not put it on, did not hold it up to the light, just held it in her palm, feeling the weight of it. "Thank you," she said. The cowboy nodded. He did not know what to say. There were no words for this moment. No words that could undo what had been done or heal what had been broken. Sarah turned and walked away from a gate. She moved slowly, deliberately, like someone walking toward something they had been avoiding for a long time. The cowboy watched her go. He did not follow. He just stood there, holding the reins of his horse, waiting. She walked to the edge of the property, to the place where the land met the wild grass and the trees began. There was an old oak tree there, thick and gnarled. Its branches spread wide like arms reaching for the sky. Its roots ran deep into the earth. Sarah knelt beneath the tree. She set the ring on the ground beside her. Then she began to dig. She used her hands. No shovel, no tools, just her bare hands in the dirt. She dug slowly. The earth was hard and cold. Her fingers scraped against stones and roots. But she kept digging, deeper, wider, until there was a small hole in the ground. She picked up the ring. She held it in her palm one last time. She looked at it the way you might look at a photograph of someone you used to know, someone you used to love, someone who was gone now and never coming back. Then she placed the ring in the hole. She covered it with dirt, patted it down gently, smoothed the surface until there was no trace of what lay beneath. Just earth, just ground, just the world moving on the way it always did. She stood and brushed the dirt from her hands. She looked at the spot for a moment. Then she turned and walked back toward the cowboy. Her face was calm. There were no tears, no sadness, just a kind of quiet peace that had not been there before. "You're free to go," she said. The cowboy looked at her, at the woman who had saved his life and held a gun on him and let him stay. The woman who had carried her grief like a stone and finally set it down. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He turned toward his horse. He put his foot in the stirrup. He pulled himself up into the saddle. The leather creaked beneath him. The horse shifted, eager to move. He gathered the reins. He looked out at the road ahead, at the wide open world beyond the gate, at all the places he could go, all the people he would never meet, all the mistakes he would make and the ghosts he would carry. And then he heard her voice. "Do you have anywhere to go?" He stopped. His hands went still on the reins. He sat there for a long moment, thinking, trying to remember the last place he had called home, the last person who had known his name, the last time he had felt like he belonged somewhere. He could not remember. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "I don't." Sarah nodded. She looked at him with those steady, winter-gray eyes. And for the first time since he had met her, she smiled. Just a little. Just enough. "The barn needs a new door," she said. "And the plow is broken. And the well is running slow." The cowboy looked at her, at the house behind her, at the land stretching out in all directions, at the place where the ring was buried beneath the oak tree. He thought about leaving, about riding away and never looking back, about starting over somewhere new where no one knew his name or what he had done. But he also thought about staying, about working the land, about fixing what was broken, about learning to live with the weight of the past without being crushed by it. He thought about the way Sarah had buried the ring, not for her husband, but for herself, so she could stop carrying it, so she could finally let go. And he realized that was what he needed too. Not forgiveness, not redemption, just a chance to stop running, to stop carrying the dead, to set them down and walk away. He looked at Sarah. She looked back at him. Neither of them spoke. But something passed between them, an understanding, a quiet agreement. The cowboy dismounted. He led his horse back toward the barn. Sarah watched him go. Then she turned and walked into the house. The sun rose higher. The day began. The wind moved through the dry grass. The leaves fell from the apple tree one by one, and the earth kept what it was given. The ring lay buried beneath the oak tree, silver and silent, a relic of a life that was over, a memory that no longer needed to be carried, a burden that had finally been put down. Above it, the world went on. Sarah made coffee in the kitchen. The cowboy unsaddled his horse and set to work on the barn door. The land stretched out around them, quiet and patient, waiting for whatever came next. They did not speak about the future. They did not make promises or plans. They just lived, day by day, moment by moment. Two people who had lost everything and found something small and fragile and real in the silence between them. Not love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Just the possibility of it. The faint, distant hope of it. And that was enough. The cowboy worked until sunset. His hands were rough. His back ached. But it was a good ache. The kind that came from honest work. the kind that made you feel like you had earned your place in the world. When the light faded, he walked to the house. Sarah had set a plate for him at the table. She sat across from him while he ate. They did not talk much, just small things. The weather, the work, the way the apples were coming in late this year. When he finished, he washed his plate. He thanked her. She nodded. He walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back. "Ma'am," he said. She looked up. "I don't know your first name," he said. She smiled. Faint. Soft. "Sarah," she said. "Sarah," he repeated. He nodded. "My name's Cole." "Cole," she said, testing it, letting it sit on her tongue. "Good night, Cole." "Good night, Sarah." He stepped out into the cool night air. The stars were bright overhead. The barn waited in the darkness. He walked toward it, his footsteps slow and steady, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt like he was walking towards something instead of away from it.